Have you ever found yourself in a relationship where you kept thinking, if I just love them a little more, maybe they'll finally open up? You stay steady, you stay kind, you give your best, hoping that at some point they'll stop pulling away and start choosing you with the same clarity and depth you've been offering from the start. But instead, the more you reach in, the more they seem to disappear. It feels personal, confusing, exhausting. And worst of all, it starts to chip away at your self-worth. Hi, I'm Jim Rohn. And if that experience sounds familiar, you're not alone. Many people who care deeply fall into the same pattern, trying to fix someone avoidant by overgiving, over-explaining, or becoming the emotional anchor for both people in the relationship. But here's the truth no one tells you when your heart is on the line. The more you try to fix an avoidant, the more emotionally unsafe the relationship becomes, for both of you. Why? Because what feels like love to you can feel like pressure to them. And without realizing it, you end up doing all the work just to hold something together that was never supposed to rest entirely on your shoulders. But there's a better way. In today's video, I'm going to explain why trying to fix an avoidant partner almost always backfires, and what you can do instead to reclaim your peace, your power, and your emotional clarity. Whether you're in this dynamic now or healing from it, this conversation will help you understand the deeper patterns at play and how to break free from the cycle of chasing connection that only leaves you depleted. If you're ready for honest, grounded guidance on building emotionally healthy relationships without losing yourself, go ahead and hit subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss an episode. You deserve love that doesn't require you to abandon yourself to feel chosen. Let's get into it. When you care deeply about someone who keeps pulling away, it's easy to believe that with just a little more patience, a little more love, they'll finally feel safe enough to stay. So you keep trying. You give more of your time, more of your energy, more of yourself, hoping your consistency will earn their trust. But instead of bringing them closer, they seem to drift even further, and what starts as care slowly becomes something else. A quiet panic beneath the surface, a need to fix what feels broken, not just in them but in the connection. This isn't coming from grounded confidence, it's coming from the fear of losing them. And that fear is what subtly turns your love into a form of emotional chasing. You might think your patience is strength, but when it's rooted in anxiety, it becomes a survival strategy, not a secure foundation. It's not really patience if you're waiting for someone to become emotionally available at the cost of your own peace. It's not really love if you're losing yourself just to keep the other person from leaving. And the more you try to manage their discomfort, to help them feel ready, the more unsafe the relationship becomes. Because to someone with avoidant tendencies, even the softest pressure can feel like control. The more you step in to emotionally rescue them, the more they step out. Because their core wound tells them that closeness will cost them their freedom. What you meant as reassurance starts to feel like expectation. What you offered as support gets misread as a demand. And none of this is your fault. But it is your responsibility to recognize when you're carrying too much. A secure response doesn't look like over-explaining, over-functioning, or proving your worth. It looks like holding your emotional boundaries while letting their behavior speak for itself. It's saying, I care about you, but I won't chase clarity. I'll offer honesty, but I won't beg for effort. Because someone who is truly ready for love won't require you to keep reaching beyond yourself just to be met halfway. And when you stop trying to fix them, something powerful happens. You stop abandoning yourself. You stop trying to become the answer to someone else's fear and start becoming someone who chooses relationships that reflect your self-worth, not challenge it. What many people don't realize is that avoidant individuals are often extremely sensitive to anything that even remotely resembles emotional control, even when it's disguised as care. Your consistency, your check-ins, your emotional presence may all come from a place of love, But to someone who's wired to equate intimacy with loss of autonomy, even tenderness can feel like pressure. They might not say it outright, but internally they're reading between the lines of your act. And what they hear isn't, "I care about you," it's, "You need to be different or I won't stay." Not because that's what you actually said, but because that's what their nervous system has been trained to expect. To the avoidant mind, love often comes with a cost. It means being needed, being expected to show up in ways they don't feel ready for. So instead of interpreting care as connection, they interpret it as obligation. Even kindness becomes something they have to manage. That's why no matter how gently you try to love them, they may pull away. Not because they don't feel something for you, but because they don't yet trust that they can be themselves and stay close. So your attempts to show up may feel to them like an emotional tax. And slowly, the more you try to support them, the more they feel cornered by the silent question underneath it all. Are you enough as you are? That question terrifies them, especially when they haven't yet learned how to answer it from within. This is why the secure approach isn't to tiptoe or over-communicate, it's to give space without resentment, to love without controlling, and to allow truth without demand. You don't have to contort your care into silence just to avoid triggering their fears, but you do need to stop mistaking their sensitivity as a reason to silence your needs. Their discomfort doesn't mean you've overstepped. It means you've bumped into a part of them that still confuses intimacy with danger. That part may not be your fault, but it's not your job to heal it for them either. As this dynamic continues, it starts to wear on you in ways that don't always show on the surface. At first, you might dismiss the imbalance. You tell yourself, they're just not used to this kind of connection. Or, maybe if I stay consistent, they'll eventually feel safe enough to meet me halfway. And that hope, so pure, so well-intentioned, becomes the fuel that keeps you overextending. You plan ahead, you initiate conversations, you check in on them when they're quiet, even when your own needs are going unmet. You keep the emotional glue in place, holding the pieces of the relationship together with invisible effort. But here's what happens next. The more you give, the more they settle into receiving without accountability. And the longer this goes on, the more it starts to feel like you're the only adult in the emotional room. They may not ask you directly to do this labor, but they come to expect it. They get used to you being the emotionally available one, the calm one, the understanding one. You start to feel like a safe container for their fears, their moods, their unpredictability, while yours quietly pile up, unspoken and unattended. Over time, you begin to notice something heartbreaking. Loving them doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like shrinking, like editing yourself to keep the peace, like swallowing your own feelings because you've learned that honesty leads to distance. It's a slow erosion of your voice, your vibrancy, your right to ask for more. And this is where many people begin to confuse endurance with love. You tell yourself you're being loyal, when in fact you're being avoidant with your own pain. You say you're being patient, but really you're afraid to name the truth. This isn't balanced, this isn't safe, and this isn't sustainable. Because you're not supposed to love someone so much that you forget what it feels like to be loved back. A securely attached person catches this pattern not with blame, but with deep self-respect. They stop over-functioning, they stop rescuing, and most of all, they stop interpreting someone's lack of effort as a sign to try harder. Instead, they recognize that connection without reciprocity is not a sign of loyalty. It's a form of emotional overwork. And in healthy love, your needs are not seen as burdens. They are welcome, they are heard, they are held. If you feel like the more you care, the less space you have to be yourself, that's not love. That's emotional imbalance. And you don't fix that by becoming easier to love. You fix it by returning to your truth. I don't need to prove that I'm worthy. I need to protect the parts of me that already are. And that begins the moment you stop managing the relationship alone and start asking who shows up when I stop carrying both sides. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. And clarity is what love actually needs to grow. At the root of this dynamic, beneath all the effort, the waiting, the emotional caretaking, is one painful truth. You've been doing the inner work for them. You're not just managing the relationship, you're also carrying the emotional weight they've avoided. You make excuses for their distance. You overanalyze their silences. You hold space not only for their wounds, but also for their avoidance of those wounds. And while your heart may tell you this is love, what's really happening is that you're standing in for the growth they aren't ready or willing to do themselves. This creates a dangerous illusion. It makes the relationship look functional on the outside, but only because you are doing the emotional heavy lifting behind the scenes. You regulate the tension, you initiate the repair, you take responsibility for creating safety while they remain tucked inside their comfort zone. And whether you realize it or not, this imbalance sends a quiet message. You don't have to change. I adapt to you. But here's the cost. When you become their emotional shelter, they no longer have a reason to evolve. Why would they learn to self-reflect when you do the reflection for both of you? Why would they stretch toward emotional intimacy when you keep cushioning every impact? This isn't partnership. It's emotional parentification disguised as patience. You turn into a safe zone they retreat to, but never really build with. You become the place they land, not the person they rise alongside. And while this might feel like love in the moment, especially for someone who equates love with self-sacrifice, it's actually a quiet form of self-abandonment, because while you're busy being understanding, your own emotional needs slowly starve. You're loving them at the cost of your own evolution. And that's not your role. You are not here to be a placeholder while someone avoids themselves. You are not here to hold the emotional container so they don't have to grow. You are not their sanctuary in place of maturity. A secure person knows that real intimacy requires shared effort. It's not about rescuing someone from their wounds, it's about walking beside someone willing to face them. If you're the only one tending to emotional clarity, if you're the only one brave enough to name what's real, then you're not in a mutual relationship. You're in a one-sided contract. And at some point you have to ask, is it love if I'm the only one doing the work of becoming emotionally available? True connection asks both people to show up with honesty, not just presence. It asks for responsibility, not refuge. And you deserve a relationship where growth is mutual, not optional. Where you are met, not managed. Where you are chosen, not just comforted. Because you are not a temporary shelter for someone unwilling to step into emotional adulthood. You are someone worthy of building a life with. Equally, together. So what do you do instead of trying to fix them? You stop building your connection on hope and start building it on clarity. You hold boundaries, not because you want to control the other person, but because you finally realize that your peace matters too. You stop waiting for their potential to show up and start paying attention to their patterns. And most importantly, you stop confusing emotional intensity with emotional intimacy. You don't need to threaten, manipulate, or chase. You simply take your energy out of trying to convince someone to care and reinvest it in your own self-respect. You say without drama, I'm here for connection, but not for confusion. I'm available for mutual effort, not emotional guesswork. That might sound simple, but for someone who's been anxiously attached, it's radical, because it means walking away from the fantasy version of the relationship, the one where your love magically heals them, and facing the reality of who they are right now, not who they could be, not who they show up as in brief moments, but who they consistently are. And this isn't about punishing or testing anyone. This is about choosing not to abandon yourself in the name of being patient. True patience honors your timing too. It doesn't ask you to stay in cycles that cost you your emotional well-being. And when you stop trying to fix someone, you actually give them the one thing they truly need if they're ever going to grow: space. Not space as a threat, but as a reflection of emotional maturity. I care about you, but I won't carry this alone. That's not cold. That's clarity. That's self-worth speaking. Because the truth is, if someone only stays connected when you're doing all the work, then it was never real connection. It was emotional dependency dressed up as love. And you deserve better than that. You deserve a relationship that doesn't require you to tiptoe over function or constantly explain why your needs matter. The right person won't ask you to prove your worth by carrying the relationship on your own shoulders. They'll meet you where you are, emotionally, consistently, and with the willingness to grow together. Let go of fixing, let go of performing, let go of trying to be enough for someone who hasn't chosen to be enough for themselves. Because real love doesn't ask you to shrink, it invites you to stay whole. One of the most powerful shifts you can make, especially when you're in a dynamic with someone avoidant, is to stop living in the gray. Choose clarity over assumption. Choose directness over decoding. Because the longer you tolerate ambiguity, the more your mind will fill in the blanks with hope, fantasy, or fear. And that's how you lose your footing, when you start reading between the lines instead of reading the actual signs. If they care, let them show it. If they're ready, let their actions, not just their words, reveal that. You don't need to dissect every message, reread every silence, or wonder what their behavior might mean. Stop relying on potential. Stop clinging to almosts. Look at what's real. Because real love doesn't require you to beg, guess, or convince. It shows up clearly. It communicates. It follows through. You might be tempted to give more grace, to understand just a little longer. But what if your endless understanding is actually keeping you stuck in a situation that feeds your anxiety and delays your peace? The truth is, emotional clarity isn't a luxury. It's a basic need. You are allowed to want words that match actions. You are allowed to stop twisting yourself into someone easier to love. And you are allowed to stop waiting for someone to get it on their own. Say what you mean. Ask what you need to ask. And then watch what they do. Because a person's readiness isn't in how well they speak about emotions. It's in how consistently they show up when it counts. And while you're watching them, don't forget to return to you. Turn some of that attention inward. What makes you feel safe? What makes you feel seen? Are you living as someone who waits to be chosen, or someone who is already choosing themselves? Because that's the real turning point, when you stop obsessing over how to win someone's love and start becoming someone who doesn't need to be chased, fixed, or tolerated to be loved. You become someone who doesn't settle for confusion. Because you've finally decided your peace isn't up for negotiation. Thank you so much for staying with me through this video. If you're still here, it means you're not just looking for answers, you're committed to growth. And that matters more than you know. Today we unpack something many people silently struggle with: the painful cycle of trying to fix someone who's emotionally avoidant. We talked about how that instinct, though deeply human, often leads to more distance, not more connection. We explored why overpressuring doesn't bring someone closer, and how it can actually delay their growth and compromise your own. We also looked at what to do instead: holding boundaries, choosing clarity over hope, watching behavior instead of hanging on to words, and most importantly, reconnecting with your own emotional truth. Because at the end of the day, you don't need to be chosen by someone who's still running from themselves. You need to choose you over and over again. Your value isn't something that has to be proven, performed, or negotiated. It's something you get to protect, honor, and live from. If anything in this video resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. Drop a comment and share your experience, whether it's something you've gone through, something you're still healing from, or a lesson that finally landed today. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read right now. And if this kind of grounded, emotionally honest guidance is something you want more of, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. This space is here to support your clarity, your peace, and your path back to yourself. Keep growing, keep choosing you. The love you're looking for starts with the way you love and honor yourself. I'll see you in the next video.